I welcome everyone in this today's session on qualitative, quantitative, and mixed methods for research. In this session, we will go through each type of research method such as qualitative, quantitative, and mixed methods, and then we'll take a look which is applicable for our research and how can we choose the appropriate method for our research. Throughout the presentation, we'll cover the introduction to the research methodologies. Then we'll take a look at different types of research methodologies. We'll also cover choosing the right research methodology for ourselves. What are the different types of research paradigms? What is the aim of the particular research? When to use which kind of methodology which is appropriate for that particular research? And what are the challenges and criticisms among those different types of methods? And finally, we'll conclude the session. Let's begin with introduction to the research methodologies. If we look at what are the research methodologies and what are the different methods? Research methods, they refer to the techniques and strategies which are used to systematically collect and analyze the information in order to answer the specific research question. We have to select the appropriate research method for our research, which highly depends on the nature of the research problem, the question which we are trying to address, and the theoretical framework what we are trying to put for the studies. That's why the research methodology and selection of it is extremely important for our research. If you look at the importance of the research methods, they provide a structured approach for collecting and analyzing collect and analyze the data and make the interpretation out of them. And it ensures that consistently we are doing it throughout all kind of work what we are doing and provides the reliability. The proper selection method ensures the integrity and validity of the research. It also aligns the research objectives with the suitable data collection and analysis technique. That's why it is extremely important we have to identify the appropriate method for our research and then apply. Let's see various types of research methodologies. The first type is quantitative method. The quantitative research approach is generally used for testing the objective theories by examining the relations among the several variables. And this analysis has been performed using the numbers. Specifically, we look at the different numbers which are explaining the situation or experiment. The second type of method is called qualitative method. In qualitative research method, it explores and understand the meaning behind the individual experiment, or let's say a particular experience, or for a particular group of individuals. Third method includes mixed methods of research. Now, if we look at this, the qualitative method doesn't include the numbers, but it includes the subjective knowledge and interpretation of a particular situation or an experiment or an experience. Whereas quantitative method includes the numbers and analysis of the numerical values. Using both of them, the mixed method of research is an approach which involves collecting both quantitative and qualitative data, interpreting the two forms of data together. Sometimes it could be sequential also, sometimes it could be simultaneous also. However, the mixed method says that it is a hybrid version of both of them. If we begin with the quantitative methods, it relies on the numerical and statistical data to quantify the problem, which means we collect the data numbers for a particular experiment or an experience, and then we take the interpretation and make the conclusions. The primary aim of the quantitative analysis is to identify the general pattern and predict the future outcomes. Is to identify the general pattern and predict the future outcomes. This approach is generally rooted in the positivist paradigm, where we assume that the reality is stable, measurable, and observable. If we further look at that, quantitative research, this method aims to produce the reliable, replicable, and valid results by focusing on the structured techniques on a particular large size of sample. Or you can say in one batch there could be thousands or 10,000s or lakhs of samples, where we can apply this method, extract the numerical values or numbers, and identify the patterns through the analysis. In quantitative research, it employs the structured tools such as, let's say, surveys, experiments, and numerical data, which help us to test the theories. And the final goal is to obtain the relationships or causality between different variables which are interdependent. Whereas qualitative methods, they involve non-numerical data to explore concepts, experiences, or social phenomena in the depth, which means we look at more towards the subjective interpretation, or non-numerical data is generally used to extract the qualitative outputs. It seeks to understand how individuals interpret or make sense of their world. In contrast to the quantitative research, what it does is it aligns with the constructivist or interpretivist paradigms. We'll take a look what are those and how they work. The qualitative method, the objective or the goal is to capture the subjective experiences of the participants, offering the rich detailed narratives, which means we take a look at how people are living their experience, or we can say that we are trying to study the subjective matter, analyzing the experiences of their particular experiment. The method is often used when the researchers seek to understand social processes, behaviors, or different type of cultural phenomena. Whereas if you look at the mixed method, in this particular method, it proposes the integration of both quantitative as well as qualitative approaches, leveraging the strengths of both of them to provide the richer and more nuanced understanding of the particular experience or experiment. The mixed method approach is a pragmatic approach, and it says that integrating qualitative and quantitative techniques which help us to capitalize the strength of both of them in a particular scenario. By combining both of those quantitative as well as qualitative methods for our research, it helps us to validate the findings and explore the diverse perspectives and uncover deeper insights that might be missed when using a particular single approach, such as if we use qualitative in a standalone fashion or quantitative in a standalone fashion. In those cases, we might miss the advantage of both of them. However, if we integrate both of them, then we apply the mixed method of research, then we can leverage the advantages of both the methods. It is particularly useful in the studies where we require both of them, such as, let's say, statistical analysis and detailed context-rich exploration, making it a versatile tool for addressing multifaceted issues in several fields. If I take an example, now this example is not limited to this particular field. It is applicable to any of the field of your research. However, I am taking one simple example with reference to the civil engineering and understanding the quantitative study for that. So let's say a case study, a quantitative study in civil engineering, which could help us to explore the relationships between the frequency of preventive maintenance and the structural lifespan of the bridges. Now, which means, let's say, if we have constructed a particular bridge and if we regularly perform the preventive maintenance, in that case, the lifespan of the successful duration for that particular bridge goes up. Now, if I apply the quantitative study, and you can say that, let's say, for an instance, For 50 bridges, we can analyze and identify that how frequently we are applying the maintenance intervals and how many years we have extended the lifespan of that particular bridge. If you look at this, why is it quantitative? Because we are applying the numbers here, such as, let's say, we are trying to identify the different bridges. Let's say in number, it could be, a study could cover 50 different bridges. And let's say I'm performing the preventive maintenance every 3 months, right? And how many preventive maintenance have been performed? And in response, how many years have been saved? Or we can say how many years have been added in the lifespan. Now that's how we can perform the quantitative analysis. Let's take one example of the qualitative study. Let's say, for an example, a qualitative study in a software engineering might investigate different developers' perceptions of a newly implemented agile methodology, and to understand their experiences in execution of that particular methodology and what they think about it, we conduct the thorough interviews with them and try to understand what's their experience, right? What's their experience? So now, let's say if I conduct the interviews for 15 software engineers and try to find out different experiences or perspective or their viewpoints on that particular newly developed methodology, right? And for an example, let's say if I conduct the 15 software engineers interviews and then collect what challenges they are facing, what improvements can be done further, what changes can be made, and then their overall perception or perspective about that particular experience, right? So that's how we can perform the qualitative study. Now, this is not limited to this particular field. In the field of your study, you can correlate with other examples also, such as, let's say, next example is of the mixed method studies. Now, in the mixed method studies, we generally hybridize both the approaches, what we just discussed. The first one was quantitative and the second one was qualitative, right? So if I take the example of, let's say, a renewable energy, and if I wanted to take the case study, so I'll apply the mixed method of study in that particular experiment, and I will try to assess the efficiency of the solar panel installations in the urban areas, followed by the qualitative interviews with the engineers to explore the challenges in the panel design and placement. So for an example, let's say if I am performing 200 installations of the solar panels in the rural areas, right? So I will take the numbers and I will observe the efficiency of the solar panel in terms of numbers. That's the quantitative analysis. And I will take the interviews of those engineers, those who are reaching the rural areas for the interviews, and I will try to gather the challenges in the panel installation process, right? That's qualitative analysis, right? So that's how I will hybridize both the approaches, which are qualitative and quantitative, and apply in the mixed methods of research in this particular case study. However, this is not limited to this particular field, definitely can be extended to any of your field also. Why choosing the right methodology matters? Why choosing the right methodology matters? The choice of the correct research method determines how effectively we can answer our research questions. The choice of the correct research method determines how effectively we can answer our research. For an example, let's say if I am exploring the live experiences of engineers, those who are working in the high stress environments, right? Those who are working in the high stress environment, such as, let's say, those who are managing critical infrastructure during the disaster or during the natural disasters, right? Now, how do I do this? So here, the best method is the qualitative method, because how can I apply the quantitative method? Because it's difficult to measure their experiences or their emotions, or how are they handling those tasks which are coming during the natural disasters, right? So their thinking process, their decision-making process, their coping mechanisms, they cannot be quantified. Therefore, we cannot apply the quantitative analysis. Therefore, we cannot apply the quantitative analysis. Here, the best method is to apply the qualitative analysis. Here, the best method is to apply the qualitative analysis. That's why it is extremely important that we choose an appropriate research methodology or research method for our research, which is extremely suitable for our research problem. Selecting an appropriate research methodology is crucial for ensuring that the research question is addressed effectively and rigorously. Selecting the appropriate research method is extremely crucial in the process so that we can effectively address our research question. The choice should be based on the several critical factors, such as, let's say, it includes nature of the research problem, which kind of research problem we are dealing with, the goal of the research problem, what is the ultimate goal of our research, the type of data which we want for that research, the type of data which is required to conduct that research, and the philosophical orientation of a researcher also, such as, let's say, a researcher has the expertise in qualitative or in the quantitative, or he is an expert of both of them. Then accordingly, based on his interest and expertise and philosophical orientation, one can choose the research method. There are majorly four factors, which influence the selection of the methodology. The first one is the nature of the research problem. Second one is the objective. What is our objective? What is the final goal of the research? Third one is the research question. What's the question, right? What kind of research is this? And the fourth one is the practical consideration, right? Practical considerations can be availability of the data. Sometimes we face the data limitations. Sometimes expertise available for a researcher. Sometimes, right, he is not an expert in a particular method. And there are various other factors, the practical scenarios, which we have to keep in mind before selecting a particular research methodology. Right? And now let's see the different factors influencing the methodology selection. Let's begin with the nature of the research problem. Quantitative methods, they are often suitable for the research that seeks to test a particular theory and establish cause and effect relationships. Whereas qualitative methods are better for exploratory research. If I'm trying to explore a new experience or, let's say, new situation, and let's say if we are trying to develop the understanding or deeper understanding on a new scenario, in that particular case, qualitative method works better than the quantitative method. Let's take a look at the research objectives. We should ask the question to ourselves that is the goal to measure the is the goal to measure and quantify the variables, or to explore the concept and perspectives. If, let's say, there is substantial qualitative analysis is available in the literature and we want to go much more deeper and make it generalized across a larger population, in that case we can use the statistical methods and apply the quantitative analysis. Whereas on the other hand, if, let's say, substantial initial background is not available, then we have to put an effort to build the initial understanding. In that particular case, qualitative method is more appropriate. Let's see the research questions. Let's say the quantitative research is often related with the questions which begin with, let's say, how much, what is the correlation, to what extent I'm looking for the improvement, which can be quantified in the numbers, right? These questions, they lead towards the specific number to quantify them. They lead to the specific question, specific number to quantify a particular scenario or experiment. In this particular cases, quantitative method is extremely useful. In this particular cases, quantitative method is particularly useful. Let's see the qualitative research, where a qualitative methodology is extremely useful when we want to explore. Now let's say some experiences or some sort of phenomena or some sort of situation is happening, and we wanted to see how is it happening, why is it happening, this kind of questions, right? They seek to understand the complex behaviors. They seek to understand the complex behavior. In this kind of scenarios, qualitative research method is extremely useful. In this kind of scenarios, qualitative research methods are extremely useful. Let's take a look at the practical scenarios, right? Okay, so there are certain practical considerations, such as, let's say, available resources. Sometimes we do not have availability of the data. We have to gather the data, but data is not available. That means we cannot conduct the quantitative analysis. As we know, for the quantitative analysis, we need the large number of samples and their outputs, and which is not available. Therefore, either we go in the field and we perform and then we do the analysis. That takes a long time. However, we have to do it also for sometimes, but that takes a long time. And let's say sometimes basic background or understanding is not available on a particular scenario or experience or experiment, right? In that case, we have to do the qualitative analysis first, and then subsequently we can build the data and perform the quantitative analysis, right? Sometimes, let's say, the time is not available, right? So in that case, we cannot go and collect thousands or lakhs of samples. Then in that case, we have to go with the qualitative, not quantitative. But let's say data is available or time is available, so we can go in the field and collect the data also. So in that particular case, quantitative method is extremely useful. Let's say sometimes we have the access to the participants for the interviews, or sometimes we don't have the access to the participants for the interviews, right? Sometimes funding is an issue for all those, right? For conducting the interviews, we have to pay to the participants also sometimes, because could be the paid participation. So it depends on all the scenarios where we have to choose a particular method. And the second factor is the familiarity and expertise of the researcher for a particular method. Let's say if I am a researcher and I am much more comfortable in the quantitative analysis and doing the Excel, or let's say doing the data analysis. In that case, I should go ahead with the quantitative analysis and analyze the numbers and find out the patterns. Data analysis, it could be done through that method. But let's say I'm not comfortable in that, then I have to go and apply the qualitative method, where I can go and conduct the qualitative experiments on that. So it depends on the researcher's orientation. There are several types of research paradigms, and which are mainly divided into the four. First one is the positivism. Second one is the constructivism. And interpretivism. That's the third one. And the fourth one is the pragmatism. Now, all the methods, they evolve from lots of debates and through these different paradigms, right? Let's take a look one by one for each and then understand what they mean. Positivism. Let's begin with the positivism paradigm. So it assumes that the reliability is objective and can be discovered through the empirical observation and measurement. That assumes that reality is, we can observe and quantify it. We can observe and quantify it through the experiments. Positivism, it aligns with the quantitative methods. And it supports the idea that phenomena can be observed and quantified in a controlled manner, right? So what I'm trying to do, let's say I'm trying to conduct an experiment, and under the measurable and controlled environment, so that I can quantify my target variables or parameters which I'm trying to measure, right? And generally, these research designs based on positivism often use structured techniques such as, let's say, experiments, surveys, and other methods to produce the generalizable findings. The next paradigm was interpretivism. In contrast to the positivism, this one holds that the reality is socially constructed and cannot be understood through objective measurement alone. It says that reality is progressive and socially constructed. We cannot just quantify it. We cannot just quantify it in terms of numbers, and which is true often in many of the cases where, let's say, the numbers are not sufficient to capture the depth. Numbers are not sufficient to capture the depth. Now, in the interpretivist approach, it aligns with the qualitative method. It aligns with the qualitative method, and it seeks the understanding and the subjective meanings that people attach to their experiences. Generally, it focuses to understand the subjective approach or subjective content of a particular experience, right? Of a particular experience or experiment. In this, often it involves the close interaction between the researcher and participant, which means a researcher will take the interview of the participant, or could be an open discussion, and based on their discussion, they draw down the conclusions qualitatively. Capturing the depth of that particular context. Next paradigm was constructivism. It closely relates to the interpretivist. But it places more emphasis on the co-construction of the knowledge between the researcher and participant. And it says that knowledge is seen as evolving, not static. Their basic assumption is knowledge cannot be static. It is continuously evolving. It is progressing. It is continuously evolving. It is progressing. It is not static, right? And this method includes participants' observations, right? Could be through interviews, could be through document analysis, could be through focusing on understanding the process by which individual they make sense of their world, and we draw the qualitative conclusions. The next approach was pragmatism. There was there were a lot of debates and ongoing discussions between across different paradigms. However, then later people realized that both the methods, they have advantages and disadvantages. So they said, let's go with the pragmatism approach, a flexible paradigm that focuses on the research problem rather than the specific method to be used. Rather than the particular method to be used, which means it advocates that use whichever method, qualitative or quantitative or mixed method, doesn't matter, whichever method is fitting with that particular research problem and experiment, use that. So it advocates use whichever works best and gives the outputs. So pragmatism, it aligns well with the mixed methods of research. Where it focuses on practical implications and outcomes of the research. So generally it says apply qualitative wherever it is applicable, apply quantitative wherever it is applicable, and draw the best outputs and get the best output. Let's see how the aim of research is an important parameter or factor for selecting a particular method. So the aim of the research is typically framed by a type of the question which researcher seeks to answer, right? And the research aim reflects the goals of the investigation, and it guides the methodology, data collection and analysis and other things, right? So such as, let's say, based on my aim of a particular research, what's the type of my research question, right? What kind of goals I'm trying to accomplish, and based on that I have to find out, right? And if I look at this, there are three types of researchers. The first one is the exploratory research. We'll take a look each in detail. The next one is the descriptive research. And the third one is the explanatory research. Right? Let's begin with the exploratory research. It is conducted when the subject is new or not well understood. It would be conducted when the subject is new and not well understood, right? And not well understood. The goal is to gain the insights and familiarity with a particular phenomenon. The goal is to acquire a deeper understanding on a particular phenomenon, often using the qualitative methods like case studies or interviews or something, right? So this is kind of when we are trying to explore a particular research question or a particular situation scenario, we go ahead in the exploratory research mode and then try to explore the understanding or develop the understanding. Such as, let's say, the example, an exploratory research study could be investigation of the factors that influence the social media usage among the teenagers, right? And I want to understand how social media impacts the productivity of the people. It could be the positive, in the positive direction, if a sensible usage of the social media is used, such as, let's say, a YouTube can be used for learning purpose. In that case, the productivity goes up. Whereas it could be in the reverse direction also, such as, let's say, we keep doing the endless scrolling across any of the social media platform. In that case, time sinks and we lose the productivity as well as time, both of them, right? So those kind of qualitative research can be performed. Those kind of qualitative research can be performed. Exploratory research often it is conducted in the areas where little prior research exists. And we want to establish the understanding for other researchers also, right? We want to establish the other understanding for other researchers also. For an example, let's say in the emerging field like artificial intelligence, right? These days we know that AI is everywhere across all the domains. Now, then the question comes, the ethical perspective, right? How we look at the ethics for using the AI in several fields, right? So this is kind of an exploratory research. In that, what we can do is we can conduct the interviews of different experts, and then we can try to draw their understanding about it, and we can try to build our understanding also. Descriptive research. The aim is to describe the characteristics of a population or phenomenon, where generally we try to describe a particular scenario, experience, experiment, or a particular general thing. In that case, we use the descriptive research. This type of research often involves surveys or observational studies, observational studies to gather the data, right? To gather the data, we go ahead and conduct the survey. We go ahead and make the observations. By that, we can draw the conclusions and describe the particular phenomena. Such as, let's say, a descriptive study might measure the level of job satisfaction among nurses in a particular hospital. So I go to a particular hospital, a particular case study, and I just wanted to see how are they satisfied with the current job scenario, right? And then this can be done by, let's say, through the interviews, and then I describe the situation. Descriptive studies do not attempt to draw causal connections, but it aims to provide the detailed picture of the situation as it exists, right? It exactly explains what's the scenario is. And for an example, it could be the National Survey on Healthcare Access, where the goal is to describe the patterns across different demographic groups, right? I'm just trying to look at the health access across demographic groups, right? And this can be done by the interviews easily. Explanatory research. It seeks to explain the relationships between the variables, right? Let's say if I change one particular variable, what is the change in other variable, right? Such as, let's say, X is the independent variable, Y is the dependent variable. If I change X, what's the change in Y? That's called dependent variable, right? Y is dependent variable, and this is called a causal relationship. And I try to explain why Y changes as I change X, right? This is typically the domain of quantitative research. This is typically a domain of the quantitative research, where we frame the different hypotheses and try to test them and try to determine the cause and effect relationship. For an example, let's say an explanatory research might investigate the relationship between socio-economic status and the academic achievement using a regression analysis. For example, let's say I can find out 100 people, and then I can look at their academic qualifications and their socio-economic status, right? And we can draw down a situation with terms of numbers. So such as, let's say, number of degrees or number of qualifications or number of years of experience versus their salary. This could be quantified in terms of numbers, and we can perform the quantitative research and explain the entire scenario. Exploratory research is generally designed to test theories and often involves rigorous statistical techniques to establish the causality. Because let's say if I've studied well, naturally I would get a good job, right? So that kind of correlations can be extracted to understand the causal behavior. For an example, a study on the effect of education policies might use a longitudinal design to track changes in students' performance over the time. And how we do that? Let's say if I am changing a particular policy, let's say NEP or National Education Policy, right, has been introduced, and I can quantify and measure the causal behavior of the dependent variable here, which could be students' performance, right, in terms of numbers, let's say in terms of their percentages or in terms of their CGPA or grade performance index, whatever is the evaluation metric, right? So I can measure them and I can understand that if I change the education policy, what would be the change in the students' performance? That can be studied. Now let's see each approach in more detail. Quantitative research, which is a scientific approach, and if we look at the evolution of the quantitative research, it generally stems from the natural sciences. It stems from the natural sciences, such as, let's say, physics or chemistry, where it was initially developed to study phenomena through empirical measurements, empirical and measurable evidences, right? So we can look at this, all the sciences, their field, generally they look at the numbers and try to find out the conclusions from there. Early 17th century, people used it for statistics in population studies and economics. In the 19th century, introduction of the randomized trials and experimental methods in medical research also, right? This is not limited to this, could be examples of a particular person's field of study also. Quantitative research method is structured and it seeks to quantify the relationships between variables, which means, let's say I have one particular variable, let's say change in the educational policy, and what would be the change in the students' performance in terms of percentage, right? Or you can say in terms of their socio-economic performance, which could be measured through the salary or their business incomes, right? Or could be now through other performance metrics. So now this can be quantified easily. It's typically used in the studies where the local goal is to test the hypothesis and predict the outcomes to find the correlations, right? Generally, it can be hypothesis driven, where researchers often begin with a hypothesis based on the existing theories or previous studies, and the goal is to confirm or refute the hypothesis by collecting the measurable data. So let's say after the qualitative studies, there is enough research available, right? And what we are trying to do is employ quantitative research methods and validate this qualitative research or understanding, and then try to complement or say that the quantitative studies says opposite to it, or we can say that the qualitative research is right and the quantitative analysis is also complementing that particular understanding. Generally, the measurable variables, they are measurable. We can clearly measure them in terms of numbers. For an instance, let's say if you want to study the happiness, right, then we can quantify that easily in a particular scale, right? Let's say psychological, by using a standardized psychological scale in, let's say, 1 to 10 scale or 1 to 7 Likert scale, right? So then we can say, let's say I am happy, but how happy I am, right? If I have to find it out, let's say I can give a scale out of 10, I can put it, let's say myself, I'm extremely happy, 8. Right? Or I'm happy, silent, okay, then 6 to 7. That's how I can scale my happiness. Deductive approach, generally it starts from a theory, develops a hypothesis, collects the data, and then tests whether the data supports the hypothesis or not. Whether the data supports the hypothesis or not. And the sample size would be large. This could be an advantage as well as disadvantage also. Advantage is sometimes it could be useful to generalize across the larger population. Disadvantages is we need a lot of data. So and then that takes more time also. To analyze that kind of large size of data, right? And the common methods which we use for this is conduct surveys, conduct experiments, conduct longitudinal studies, etc. Right? So these are the major approaches. Surveys, right? These are generally used to collect the data from large populations by using structured questions. Let's say I want to look at the poll of the election, right? I have to identify which party will win the election. In that particular case, I will go to the field and conduct the survey across, let's say, 1,000 of people, and then I can collect their opinion, quantify on a particular scale, let's say 1 to 10, and then try to draw the conclusion, right? So that could be the surveys method. For instance, let's say surveys can be used to gather information about people's shopping behavior. One case study could be, right, people's shopping behavior. Next method is experiments. It involves manipulating one or more independent variables to determine their effect on the dependent variables. Let's say the experiments. So such as, let's say, one particular education policy could be an experiment. I change that education policy and I observe for next 5 years to measure the impact on the students' performance, and then I will take the corrective actions. If the performance is improving, good, we continue with the policy. If the performance is not improving, we will change the policy or tweak around for a better performance. For an example, let's say experiment might measure how different teaching methods affect the student performance. So let's say if I'm teaching a particular class, right, and if I am speaking too rapidly, students may not be able to understand my point. However, if I change the method, I use, let's say, regular pauses in between. I use the structured material. I use more engaging material. I employ questions and answers learning method. Then in that case, the students' performance or their learning get boosted. So it depends how I am going to do that, and that can be quantified in terms of their grades or percentages or marks which they obtained during the exam. Longitudinal studies, this track the same subjects over the time to observe the change and identify the trend. Generally, it lasts for the longer period of time. So such as, let's say, NEP, right? It would look at the practical scenario for, let's say, a decade or 2 decades, and then look at these the changes in that, right? So that kind of study. For an example, let's say longitudinal study might examine the impact of education on the income level of 10 years. So let's say if you focus more on the education, most likely people will be learned and their understanding level would be better. So in their life, whatever the challenges come, they can survive very easily, and then they can keep doing their businesses and jobs and earn well. So over the period of 10 to 20 years, we can study what is the impact of their education on their socio-economic status, right? Common quantitative methods, we employ the hypothesis testing, which are specific testable statements which are derived from the theory, such as, let's say, regular exercise reduces stress level in the adults, right? The regular exercise, so reduce the stress level in the adults. Now, how to quantify? It's very easy to quantify. Here, if you look at this independent variables, the variables that are manipulated generally could be a diet, right? Along with the exercise, diet. So let's say if I do the exercise for 30 minutes, my overall life expectancy can be increased from 73 to, let's say, 80, or maybe let's say 70 to 75, right? And if I control my diet, let's say if I eat 2 times or 3 times, right, accordingly my other things will go up. Or let's say if I sleep at 9 p.m. and wake up at 6 a.m. or 5 a.m., entire days goes productive. Overall productivity of the day goes higher, right? So those are quantifiable very easily. We can quantify it. We can quantify both the parameters. Operationalization, right? Operationalization, it is generally turning abstract concepts into the measurable entities, such as, let's say, IQ score. How do I measure the intelligence of a student? Quantified using IQ, using intelligence quotient. Generally, IQ score is a measurement of a person's intelligence, person's capability to think differently, right? This kind of things can be quantifiable very easily. It is reliable and so generally reliability, it talks about the consistency of the measurements, consistency of the measurement, and the validity, whether the research accurately reflects the concept it intends to measure or not, right? Sometimes we apply the statistical analysis also. Sometimes we apply the statistical analysis also, such as, let's say, regression analysis. Such as, let's say, regression analysis, which is nothing but the correlation coefficients, which are nothing but the there are different techniques. I misspoke on it. There are different techniques, such as, let's say, regression analysis, correlation coefficients, and hypothesis testing, right? T-test or other tests, right? So those kind of methods we can use for the statistical analysis. Quantitative data topics might be, let's say, could be the example. You can take it in this way: company's profitability. A comparison of primary school children's reading marks and family background, right? The students' performance and their family background. Easily we can quantify and correlate. There are strengths, there are limitations of each approach. Let's take a look at the strengths and limitations of the quantitative method. Strengths include that it can handle the large amount of data. And when we talk about the large amount of data, which means we can easily generalize across the population, and it would be reliable because we are performing studies on a larger sample size, and it offers clear objectives. It offers clear results without any doubts, because everything is in terms of numbers and we can draw them. Limitations: it lacks the contextual understanding and deeper meaning behind the data. Sometimes we are not able to, or we are not capable to extract the deeper understanding through just the numbers, where qualitative can be a better approach. May overlook unmeasured variables or complexity of the human experiences also, right? That's why, to overcome these limitations, people use the mixed version of qualitative as well as quantitative. In qualitative approach, generally the origin of the qualitative approach, it emerged from the fields like this particular, like earlier 20th century, the scholars used to understand the human culture and the behavior from an insider perspective. They try to observe a particular group and what's the behavior and what's the perspective of them, right? Key theories and movements, such as, let's say, this particular movement emphasized the meaning-making process of the social interactions, right? So it generally what it tries to see that, okay, what's the meaning of this particular interaction, and then tried in that way qualitatively, right? So these are the different scenarios where it got up. There are few more theories in the support of that particular evolution of the qualitative approach. Let's take a look at the basic definition of the qualitative research. Qualitative research, it focuses on exploring and understanding the perspectives and experiences of individuals. It tries to explore the understanding and perspective of a particular, let's say, experiment or a group of people or a particular scenario, and in that particular direction. Let's say a particular scenario we can take, and with reference to that we can understand. It is more flexible than quantitative. it is more flexible than quantitative. It is not that kind of stubborn with reference to the numbers. It is more flexible, and it is changing, evolving based on the discussions between the participant and interviewers. More towards the exploratory in nature. It aims to explore the phenomena where little is known. And for an example, exploring how people experience social media addiction. Now I can go ahead and see different people are addicted to social media usage, including myself. And then we wanted to study this behavior of the social media usage on our productivity. And the addiction, how uncomfortable we are if we are not able to see the notifications or our cell phone for, let's say, for 2 hours, right? We'll feel uneasy. Now that's qualitative understanding, right? That's qualitative understanding. It is a context-driven approach. The study is typically conducted in the natural settings where phenomena occurs, and the focus is to understand the events and behaviors within the specific context which within a particular context with reference to that particular scenario. And we are trying to extract the subjective meaning, right? We are trying to extract the subjective meaning. And generally, the advantage is sample could be smaller one. So let's say if I have to conduct an experiment to identify what's the impact of social media and the addiction of it on us, I can take a sample of 20 people and take the interviews and try to discuss with them, right? Try to discuss with them, including myself in that. So I can try to discuss with them, and then that is sufficient because we can have an initial discussion and build the understanding on a smaller sample size, right? So that could be one advantage also. There are 4 common qualitative methods which people use for measurement of the data and drawing down the conclusions, such as, let's say, interviews. They conduct the interviews, right? Next is the focus groups. Third is the ethnographies. And fourth one is the case studies. Let's take a look at each method one by one and understand where we apply which one. Qualitative research methods such as, let's say, interviews. This can be structured, semi-structured or unstructured depending on the level of flexibility needed. Researchers may conduct in-depth interviews to understand the motivations behind certain behaviors. Such as, let's say, why people want to quit smoking. Right? If I'm smoking and if I want to quit smoking, why? Right? So I can take the interview. Let's say if I am a smoker, someone else who is the researcher can take my interview. Then I can say, smoking, firstly, it tanks health. So let's say if I smoke one cigarette every 30 minutes, as long as I'm awake, I might be smoking 20 or 15 cigarettes a day, right? So that tanks the health directly. That could be the first reason why I want to stop or quit smoking. Second reason, each cigarette costs $20, right? Huge amount of cost. So entire packet would cost a huge amount. At the day. In Indian currency, we might be losing 200 to 300 rupees. That's a huge. And monthly, if I do that for monthly, it could come around 10,000 rupees, right? That's huge economical loss. That's why I wanna quit smoking. That could be one qualitative discussion. Third, the time lost. Let's say each cigarette I might waste 15 minutes to smoke or to arrange the cigarette another 15 minutes. So each round can cost me 30 minutes of loss. So on an average daily 3 to 4 hours would be just lost in smoking. 3 to 4 hours, huge time loss. Can be used to learn something, can be used to play, can be used for an exercise, right? A lot of other things can be done where real joy comes out. That's why I want to quit smoking. Now, another one, I might be losing 10,000 rupees a day, which can be invested somewhere, and that money can help to grow other things, or it could be spent on the education, self-development, anywhere, right? So those losses can be prevented if I just get rid of this bad habit. So that's why I want to quit smoking. That is the interview between the interviewer and participant, and that's how we can quit smoking. Right? So other method is called a focus group. A small group of people discuss a particular topic, providing insights into group dynamics and share the cultural norms, right? So we frame the small group of the people, selected people, and let them do the brainstorming and find out the conclusions. Ethnographies. Let's say a researcher immerses themselves in a particular community to observe the behaviors and interactions in their natural setting. So I want to learn a particular culture. So I will go there, live there for 6 months, a year or an year, and then I'll try to blend myself in that particular domain and then learn, right? And then for an example, let's say a researcher goes to a remote village or maybe some sort of tribe and then try to study their cultural practices. Case studies. Detailed examination of a single subject, such as let's say an individual or a small group or an organization, where I take the case and study that qualitatively. For an example, let's say a researcher may study a tech company to understand its unique innovation strategy. If we are innovative, others cannot outsmart us. If we keep updating our knowledge, we always stay ahead of others. If we keep innovating new products which are market driven, we get the competitive edge in the businesses, right? So that kind of qualitative analysis can be done. Let's say some of the problems, such as let's say consumer perception of a company or brand. Parents' feelings and habits about reading to their children, right? How we feel, do we read to our children or not? Right? How we feel about that. Those kind of studies. Nurses' knowledge and opinions in the infection prevention protocol. If I am implementing a new infection prevention protocol, what do they think about it? Right? How newspaper articles describe and represent a particular case. How introverts think about themselves, right? Those are qualitative studies, research topics. They're not new, but these are some of the examples to understand. There are strengths and limitations of this approach. Let's take a look at them one by one. It offers deep, detailed insights into the complex issues. I get the thorough understanding through the qualitative analysis. It can uncover underlying motivations, values, and social processes, right? Flexibility. It is super flexible compared to the quantitative because it is adapting to new findings as research progresses, because it adapts based on the situation. Let's say if I'm taking the interview, based on the discussion's direction, we can change a little bit here and there. Limitations. Results are not generalizable to a larger population, definitely. Because if I am conducting a qualitative analysis or qualitative research with reference to a particular smaller group, it may not be extended to a larger group. It may not be generalized. Sometimes it is subjective and potential bias may come from the researcher's interpretation, right? Well, let's say if I am biased towards a particular thing, then I might change or I will be biased to write in a particular direction only, right? Because of my potential bias. And often it is difficult to replicate those studies. In this particular section, we will take a look at the mixed methods of research and historical conceptual foundations and other things. So let's see the mixed methods of historical and conceptual foundations. Now, in 1980s and 1990s, researchers, they were having the discussions which method has to be used. Should we go with the qualitative? Should we go with the quantitative? Which one has to be applied? Then some of the people, they came, both of them, they have the strengths, both of them, they have the limitations. Why not apply both of them? Use mixed method of research, no harm. Use qualitative as well as quantitative, both of them, and get the best outputs, and then get the best outputs. So there are paradigm shifts. And different people worked, and then they said that pragmatic approach could be a good solution to the particular research method, a particular research question. So let's say the mixed methods, the definition. Mixed methods of the research combines both quantitative as well as qualitative approaches to address research questions from multiple perspectives. Mixed method says, do not fight with qualitative and quantitative. apply both of them, see whichever works, and then try to get the better outputs from your research question. It acknowledges that both types of data are necessary to fully understand the complex phenomena. It says both of them are essential. Qualitative also helps, quantitative also helps. Qualitative helps to build the initial understanding, capture the deeper meaning, whereas quantitative the numbers will be analyzed, and then we can identify the pattern and then complement the qualitative outputs by generalizing them across the larger samples, It combines breadth and depth. While quantitative data provides a broad overview, such as let's say trends in a population, qualitative data offers depth and context, such as let's say personal experiences of individuals within that particular population, right? Such as let's say triangulation, where mixed methods allow researchers to cross-validate findings by comparing data from multiple sources or different methods, right? So we can do the cross-validation. For an example, let's say qualitative interviews, they confirm the trend seen in a particular survey, and this strengthens the validity of the research. Now, I can apply the quantitative also and observe the numbers, and then followed by the qualitative support, right? And it could be concurrent as well as sequential. In concurrent designs, both types of data are collected simultaneously. In concurrent design, both types of data are collected simultaneously, while in sequential design, one type of data informs the other one. Such as we'll take a look in more detail. What do I mean by concurrent design and sequential design? The timing, right? In data collection, the sequence or the order of the implementation of the qualitative and quantitative data collection and analysis, the analysis of the analysis procedure in the study, right? Either could be sequential and concurrent. So here you can take a look. Let's begin this first. The common mixed methods design, which includes, let's say, convergent parallel design. Second one is, let's say, explanatory sequential design. This is explanatory sequential design, and this is exploratory sequential design. Transformative mixed methods of design. So here, if you look at this nicely, it says a particular method has to be used across a particular field. Now here, these are different designs where sequential or concurrent methods will be used. Let's see each of them where it is applicable where. First type, convergent parallel design. The qualitative and quantitative, both of them are collected, and data are collected and analyzed simultaneously, which is nothing but convergent parallel design. Name itself suggests that both of them are going to be studied together. Next one is, let's say, explanatory sequential design. The quantitative data is collected first. And then we apply the qualitative data to explain the quantitative findings, right? So it's sequential. First we do the quantitative analysis, find out the patterns based on the numbers, and then we use the qualitative analysis to explain the findings of the quantitative analysis or to support the understanding. Next one is the exploratory sequential design. We do the qualitative analysis first because we are trying to explore the understanding on a particular topic or phenomenon, and the quantitative data is generally used to test or expand upon the initial finding So here we can say that, okay, exploratory, not enough research is available, I'll go and explore first. I'll apply the exploratory approach through the qualitative analysis, and then subsequently I gather quantitative data also, and then try to identify the patterns, right, and find the outcomes. Transformative mixed methods. It combines both the methods with an explicit focus on promoting social change, often used in, let's say, several scenarios, right? when do we conduct mixed methods? Which mixed methods of study? When we have both qualitative and quantitative data. Sometimes we don't have quantitative data. Sometimes we don't have qualitative data. Then we cannot apply mixed methods. Mixed methods can be applied only when we have both of them. When we have both of them. When one data resource may not be enough to explain the answer of the question. When one method is not sufficient to explain or answer the question. That's in that particular scenario, we use the qualitative method. In that particular scenario, we use the qualitative method. When we want qualitative research to help in explaining the quantitative findings, we have the quantitative finding, but we want to complement and cross-check or validate that both the approaches are in line with each other. Then in that case, I can use quantitative for number study, and then I use qualitative find out deeper understanding of them. I want to provide the alternate perspective in the study. I want to provide the alternate perspective in that study. In that case, I will use mixed methods. When we want to generalize findings to the larger population, qualitative is limited to the smaller segment or sample, whereas quantitative is going towards the larger sample size, right? In that case, if I conduct both of them, I can find out the validation of both of them, and then I can generalize across the larger population. Reasons for using mixed methods of research. Because it combines strengths of both of these approaches. Combines both the approaches' strength and gives the better outputs. It enhances the validity and reliability of findings by cross-verifying. Definitely, I am trying to validate both of them, applying both the approach and look at the cross connections between them. So both the methods, they get complements of each other. Allows researcher to explore a phenomena qualitatively and then confirm the finding quantitatively and vice versa, right? So that's what we have just discussed. What are the steps to conduct the mixed methods of research? The first step is to determine if mixed methods of research is the best approach to address the research problem that we want to study. We have to identify what is our research problem, and then we have to see whether mixed method is applicable to that research question or not. Next step is to select a specific mixed methods design, such as, let's say, explanatory, exploratory, triangulation, or any method, and then we try to employ that. Write a detailed mixed methods purpose statement for our study. Clearly define the purpose or statement of purpose, right? Write a specific research question to address, right? And whether we want to go with how we will and what kind of aspects that we want to study, and look at what kind of experiments we will conduct for qualitative and quantitative, and then hybridize both of them. Choose qualitative and quantitative data to collect. We have to go with both of them, but how we will do that, sequentially, concurrently, depends on your research question. Draw a visual diagram of the procedures in our study. Collect and analyze. Next step is to collect and analyze the data which we have collected during the study, and write the final report reflecting the mixed methods that we have used, right? Employ both the methods, qualitative and quantitative, and in findings find and present deeper understanding through qualitative, and numbers based pattern extractions using quantitative, and check cross validate them that they complement each other, There are strengths and limitations with reference to this method also. The strength says there is a complement between each other. It provides the comprehensive understanding using the qualitative outputs as well as the quantitative numbers. Allows for more robust conclusions. It allows for more robust conclusion. It reduces the researcher's bias. Sometimes we are biased, and I may be biased for a particular viewpoint in qualitative analysis, and the accurate output I may not be able to deliver. In that particular case, quantitative may help. Quantitative may help to eliminate that kind of biases limitations. It's slightly more complex and time consuming, because We have to gather data for qualitative as well as quantitative. Then we have to analyze quantitative data. It takes time, and then subsequently we have to integrate both of them, look at the findings, whether they complement each other, whether they go opposite to each other. Subsequently we have to change, and in the course of research, then sometimes it may happen that we may have to go back and do the experiments again, if the outputs are not as per our expectations, to cross check, right? It requires an expertise. If I'm not an expert of qualitative, I may choose quantitative. If I'm not an expert of quantitative, I may choose qualitative. However, if I choose both of them, I need an expertise. Specifically, quantitative is slightly difficult because we have to use the tools such as, let's say, data analytics tool to extract the patterns from the data. So could be a challenge integrating both of them. Right? Let's take a look at the individual challenges and criticisms of quantitative research. There are ethical concerns sometimes. Let's say quantitative research, it says manipulating variables in the experimental settings can raise ethical issues. Let's say controlled experiments. I am trying to restrict an experiment in a controlled environment and then trying to manipulate the things. So numbers cannot be correct. They cannot be generalizable. That could be one disadvantage of quantitative analysis or quantitative research. Oversimplification of complex issues. Quantitative methods might reduce complex social phenomena to a few measurable variables, potentially missing the broader context. I cannot quantify everything. Like, let's say the human behaviors, I cannot quantify it, right? Sometimes if I try to put them in terms of numbers, I may lose the deeper understanding of it. External validity. Generalizability is often a challenge when the study sample doesn't accurately reflect the target population. As we said, the sample size is large, then it could be generalizable. But let's say the groups are different. Let's say I study on India, it may not be applicable to other country, right? Or the quantitative study on the behavior of the group in some other countries may not be applicable completely on Indian scenario, right? Or maybe specifically for, let's say, northeast and south, or maybe western part of the country. So that's how it changes. There are limitations and criticisms on qualitative research also. There are limitations and challenges for qualitative research also, such as, let's say, research bias. Since qualitative analysis often involves interpretation, there is always a risk of researchers' potential bias influencing the result. Let's say if I have a particular viewpoint and I am biased towards it, then entire analysis goes in that particular direction only. That's a bias. That's a risk. Reliability and applicability. It's difficult to replicate the qualitative studies due to the context-specific nature of the data. Because what I do is I study on a specific group of people, let's say 10% or 20 or 30. It cannot be generalized, and it's difficult to replicate also because that group could be isolated in let's say a tribal group in some corner part of the country, and I cannot apply that study in the metro scenarios, right? Time consuming, definitely. Collecting and analyzing qualitative data could be time consuming. Sometimes I have to go in the field, take the experiments, take the interviews, discuss with the people, gather it, and then find it, right? So it's time consuming. Travel is engaged in that. Mixed methods of research, they also have challenges and criticisms. Highly complex. We have just seen that it is complex because we are trying to integrate both of them. Integration of data, combining qualitative and quantitative data can be difficult. That integration is not so easy. It's extremely resource intensive. Mixed methods, they require more time. They require more funding. They require more expertise than using a particular standalone method. So it's like resource intensive. Finally, if we conclude this session, quantitative and qualitative and mixed methods of research, they offer unique strengths and they address different types of research questions. So we have to be savvy and identify a particular method which is suitable for our research, Understanding the procedures of collecting and analyzing the qualitative and quantitative data will enable us to reach an effective research design using the mixed methods of research. We can hybridize both of them and we can accomplish or deliver better outputs. By integrating these approaches, researchers can offer more robust, well-rounded conclusions that account for both measurable and nuanced human experiences. It says that let's employ both of them, and then try to identify the better conclusions in terms of numbers, as well as capturing the behaviors of the human experiences or the deeper understanding of a particular phenomena or experiment. That's how each method has their strengths, their limitations. Hybridization will also work. Sometimes the research question is easy, it is suitable or solvable through the qualitative or quantitative, then we have to go ahead with the standalone method. Sometimes it requires both of them to be hybridized, then in that case, mixed methods of research is extremely useful. So that's how we can do this thing. That's all I have for this particular session. Thank you very much for time and attending the session.